Howdy, 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 everybody. This is Ryan As It's Murphy coming to you with an intro video to New Japan Pro Wrestling. I was talking with some people in various comments, and someone replied to one of the comments I left, which would be, let me find the comment over here, Michael Sands. I'm going to leave the link for this video for you to watch it after I get done recording, because this will be a more thorough introduction to New Japan than I could leave in a comment, or at least a better one, I hope, and more people get to see it this way, hopefully. So, New Japan Pro Wrestling, is it worth watching, was the question. Yes, I started watching in 2015 with the G1 Climax tournament, and have not regretted watching it at all. To be fair, I am a ring action guy, not a drama guy, so the more sports-like presentation of New Japan appeals to me. There still are some elements of the usual pro wrestling soap opera drama type of stuff with New Japan, but it mostly happens in the ring, based on things that happen in the ring. You're not going to have girlfriends coming into things very much, you know, girlfriend, any of that sort of shit. It hardly ever happens with New Japan. Very, very rarely they'll have something like that come up, but only if it happens at ringside, so it would be a valet or something. Everything about New Japan is about the wrestling, one way or another. So most of your angles, your storylines are going to be about respect. They're going to be about wanting titles. Crazy thought that the primary angle of any pro wrestling promotion will be people wanting to win titles. But that's usually the main thing that acts as the core of wrestling angles in New Japan. So stylistically, and I've got the thing over here just so I can bring up some images, show you some personalities, some individuals like Chris Jericho has done a couple of matches, and considering his last time out he won a title, he's going to have at least one more match. I highly doubt he would just drop the title without a match to drop it in. But anyway, so I've got the pictures here so I can show you some different stuff that's going on. Show you logos so you'll know what to look for. New Japan World is where you can subscribe. It's an affordable service. You can look through all of their old content and stream it. It's not a very good website. It has some flaws. They need to improve that, definitely. But, you know, if you're willing to have a little bit of patience on the search functions and stuff, it's no problem. But I'll be talking about some of the main personalities when I get to that. Stylistically, it is different than Western pro wrestling because it's more about the warrior spirit. It's all about that kind of machismo element. You know, you'll see guys doing stuff that in the West we would call that no selling, where they don't act like something hurts. You know, if you're a smark like I am, you know the terminology. Even if the insiders hate us, I don't care. I'm an unrepentant smark. I'm too curious to not look into things like that when I'm interested in them. But they're not no-selling it to piss anyone off or to try to act like there's no damage being done. What they're doing is presenting you with a story of usually two guys or two teams that are willing to put themselves through just about anything in order to try to win. So you'll see stuff like somebody takes a German suplex, belly to back, release suplex, whichever, and then they'll roll up out of it and then hit a move of their own, and then both guys will fall down. And to the Western viewer, it might seem kind of odd or even stupid at first. You just have to remember the story that they are telling in New Japan. The story in a situation like that, the context of it, is that the first guy isn't experiencing no pain at all. He's not no-selling. What he's doing is powering through the pain the impact, the exhaustion, in order to get in that one strike to put the other guy down before he falls. And you'll see variations on that theme. It's all about fighting through the pain and the exhaustion, like I said. It's warrior spirit. So you're not really going to see the more linear storytelling of Western matches, if you want to call it that. It really is more about give and take, and, I'm going to fight my way through this. I might be flat on my back for the next 3 or 4 days recovering from this match, but while I am in that ring, I am going to give everything I've got to keep going and try to put the other guy on that mat for a 3 count or make him tap. And if that means that I have to break myself down and put myself out and through hell to do it, I will. Like I said, it's all about that warrior spirit. There's another spot, if you want to call it that you'll see a lot is one guy is dominating the match. The other guy is on the mat, and then the one that's dominating will kind of start kicking at him, swiping at their face with their foot or something. Not trying to do damage, just kind of like going, "Come on, what are you doing? Come on, what is this shit? Get up, come on, do something." And then the other guy will get really fired up and is like, "You disrespecting me? What the fuck are you doing here?" And then they'll start butting heads again. Or, again, to the West, it looks like they're no-selling each other or they're doing something crazy. They'll stand there and just hit each other and take turns hitting each other. Again, it's all about that feeling of the warrior spirit. It's like, I'm going to take the best you've got, and then I'm going to give you the best I've got, and we're going to see who falls down first. That's what they're saying. That's what they're doing. So stylistically, you're going to have to get used to some different, let's call them tropes, cliches, conventions, whatever you want to call them, in New Japan. Because it is a different style. Might be the same overall idea, but they do it in a different way. So that's the first thing you have to get used to. You will also find that when they do finishers in New Japan, it will seem like they're doing finishers a lot, but they really aren't. Like Okada. This is Okada right here. Up until recently, he was, I believe, the longest reigning IWGP heavyweight champ ever. This is him right here. With the title belt. This is, I think, from last year. Yeah. Either from last year or maybe earlier this year. It doesn't really matter. That's Okada. So his finisher is called the Rainmaker. What he does is he gets around behind him. He gets a wrist lock, like he's going to do a German suplex, belly-to-back suplex, and even will sometimes go from the suplex into his move. But then he swings him out with the arm, and then yanks him back in for a short arm clothesline. Now, he will hit a short arm clothesline, an abbreviated Rainmaker, if you will, sometimes 2-3 times earlier in a match. Depends on how big the match is. And some people will see that and they'll think, oh, he's doing his move so many times to finish the match. But that's not actually what's happening. The same thing will happen with other guys, like Naito is the guy over here holding with his fingers around his eyes, because that's kind of his trademark pose, if you will, is opening his eye and pointing up. This is also Naito right here, with the rest of Los Ingobernables de Japón, which is, Los Ingobernables obviously is Mexican. He joined that group in Mexico, then when he came back to New Japan, because they trade talent. CMLL in Mexico and New Japan often trade talent. He came back as a member of Los Ingobernables and started a chapter there. So his move is called the Destino, which is a variation on a standing tornado reverse DDT. Yeah. And he might hit, as I said, hit it as a counter move, an abbreviated version of it. like Okada will with the Rainmaker, and other guys will do the same sort of thing. But if they hit the full version of their finisher, Okada, like I said, gets the wrist, swings him around, hits the clothesline, it's done. So far, only 3 people have ever kicked out of a Rainmaker when he's hit it clean. Tanahashi, who is this guy over here, Omega, who is right here, and Naito, who is right here. This picture has all of them. Tanahashi's done it twice. The other 2 won each. So, New Japan protects its finishers is another thing you will learn. But again, some people think that they're hitting them several times. No. They will hit abbreviated or counter versions of them, usually with a pause before they even go for a pin attempt. When somebody hits a finisher clean, it is nearly always the finish of the match. People hardly ever kick out of them. And that is up and down the card. Usually. They don't have as rigid, you could almost call it a caste structure, as a lot of Western promotions would. If you were familiar, for example, with WWE or WCW, there was always a caste, almost like a caste structure, in that there's main eventers, mid-carders, and low-carders. And usually, if a low-carder was in a match with a mid-carder, the mid-carder was going to win. Same for main eventers and anybody else on the card, or, on the roster. New Japan is a bit more flexible, in that they don't really have that kind of a system. They will put guys that you would never expect them to put in main events in main event situations. And often they will have very good matches because they let people look competitive. They present it as a sport. And their reasoning, which makes sense, is that if you're going to be participating in some sort of a sport, if you aren't good enough to be there, you wouldn't be. So the only guys you will see lose constantly, for the most part, are the Young Lions, which is the next thing you'll have to learn about New Japan, is the Young Lion program. These are going to be the guys, they're not the only ones who dress this way, but they wear simple black trunks and sometimes knee pads, boots. But usually it's black trunks and boots. And they're young, obviously, and that's their training program. Somebody will go through the Young Lion program. Usually, I think it lasts about a year or more for them to get through the basic training, which includes working in front of audiences in opening matches, so they get used to it. And then, after they're done with their Young Lion training, they're sent on excursion, which might be to Mexico, the U.S., England. New Japan has relationships with promotions all over the world. Often they'll go several places. So they can learn. They'll learn other styles, they'll learn who they are as a pro wrestler, their persona that they want to project or create for themselves, find within themselves, and then they'll come back to New Japan. So it's actually a very good training program, but that does mean that when you see a Young Lion in a match, they're going to lose. Unless it's Young Lions versus Young Lions, in which case you don't know who's going to lose, but it's going to be one of them, obviously. So, those are some of the things that are very different from most Western promotions, particularly if all you've really experienced is WWE, or if you're a bit older, WCW as well. So let's get into some of the personalities. So I've talked about Okada with his Rainmaker, who, as I said, up until recently was the IWGP World Heavyweight Champion. Now, New Japan does not have titles named after the company. They have the IWGP titles, which are older. And, well, they may not be older so much as they have a more broad history. It's the International Wrestling Grand Prix, is what it stands for. And they kind of act as the New Japan titles. And then they've added in some newer ones that have different names, but I'm not going to go into the whole thing. You start watching, you'll get used to it. So Okada, if I was going to compare him to anybody, The Rock. He's very much The Rock in Japan. You'll find that there's a lot of similarities between 90s pro wrestling personalities and New Japan. But that's because they are smart and they go with what works. They're not just copying, they're taking inspiration. So Okada is very similar to The Rock. He even uses some of the same moves. Like, I'm pretty sure Rock used to do a DDT that he would do a kip up from it. Okada does that. But moveset-wise, there's very little similarity besides a few small things. He has one of the best drop kicks in the business. I think he can jump something like 6 feet in the air when he does the damn thing. It's quite impressive. I think the only person I've seen with a better drop kick, or equivalent at any rate, is Lance Storm, who had, if you've ever seen Lance Storm do a vertical drop kick, quite impressive back in the day. Very kind of flashy, and if you see him in a main event match, you're going to get probably more than 40 minutes of excellent wrestling. You have Naito, leader of Los Ingobernables de Japan. As I said, this is them, which is this one does not have Hiromu Tanahashi in it, but you got Naito Evil over here, who uses an STO as his finisher. He's kind of a Undertaker character, is his persona, but it was a bit awkward when he first started doing it, but he's really growing into it and made it his own. Then you got Sonata over here, who is one hell of an athlete. I wouldn't say he has the most charisma of anybody I've ever seen. He doesn't, but one hell of an athlete. Always puts on a good match. And you have behind Naito here is Bushi, who kind of works a lucha style. He likes to use the mist, the Japanese green and black and occasionally red mist in the face. Cheats a little bit, but has some style with it. He's doing it. At Hiromu, let me see, let me bring up Hiromu. There we go. Hiromu Tanahashi. Hiromu Tanahashi. There we go. There's Hiromu right there, and that is a absolutely tiny picture. There's Hiromu with Daryl. There he is with Daryl again and again. He's an interesting dude, to put it mildly. I have no idea who I could compare him to. He's maybe Vampiro a little tiny bit, because he likes to wear misfits on his jacket and stuff. He's into punk rock and that sort of stuff. So other than that, he's an individual. I'll just put it that way. I don't know how else to describe Hiromu. We're kind of ventured off into the junior heavyweight division. Let's see. There is Will Ospreay, who you may have seen highlight clip videos of. Will Ospreay is from England. He works in New Japan quite often, and very acrobatic. If you're not a fan of very acrobatic lucha style stuff, you might not like him that much. But, you know, if you were a fan of WCW's Cruiserweight division, I think you probably like Ospreay. There's a pic of Naito with Michael Elgin about to hit the Destino. I cannot tell what that is. I think that is Jay White and David Finlay. David Finlay is, of course, Fit Finlay's son. Jay White is a New Zealander who, I think he's the U.S. heavyweight champ still. He goes by Switchblade. He's They're both heavyweights, though. I'm just kind of glossing over, not glossing, but rushing through some of the personalities to give you an idea who some of these guys are that you might see watching a show for the first time. This is Minoru Suzuki, trained as a shoot-style pro wrestler, which was a style that was around in the 90s originally, and it was supposed to look as much like an actual fight as possible. Didn't last that long. He went on to be a founder of Pancrase and worked in actual MMA. He had like 50 MMA bouts under his belt, or to his name, so phrase it that way. Entertaining guy. A bit irritating for me at times because I'm not a fan of heels. Never have been. I hated the NWO back in the day. And he runs a faction, a stable called Suzuki Gun that are reminiscent of the NWO. Kind of confusing to me. I guess the whole shtick for Suzuki Gun is that they're guys that they can work matches, but they cheat all the time and are lazy. So the idea is that since New Japan is often, it's about the work rate, it's a promotion built around work rate, the biggest heels are the guys that don't do it right. But since I'm a fan of work rate more than anything else, it just irritates me when they do that stuff. But at the same time, they're not consistent. It is one of the things that it irritates me. You might not mind it so much. You might get into it more than I do. But, like Suzuki, he's just as likely to work a match clean as he is to cheat. And the same is true of most of the Suzuki Gun guys. There's really no rhyme or reason to it. But, his matches can be hit or miss, but he's usually pretty entertaining, especially when Don Callis is out on commentary, because I think he's legitimately terrified of the man, as he would be with someone who's has something like 22 submission victories in MMA. So let's see. This is Tanahashi. A little bit on the older side at this point, getting up in his 40s right now. Still can go, can still have great matches. Okada is kind of taking over, but for like between I think 2016-ish and 2006, for roughly a decade or more, Tanahashi was the guy. You know, if I want to compare him to somebody that you would recognize better, I'd say a combination of Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. I think those were probably really big. Those two guys were huge influences on Tanahashi, I think. No, that's Hiromu Takahashi. Is not Tanahashi, Takahashi for Hiromu. Some other guys, like right here we got Kushida. That's Hiromu. The Kushida, another junior heavyweight. Usually uses a submission hold as his finisher, so the junior heavyweight division is not really like the cruiserweight division in WCW where it's all high-flying luchadors. You have a variety of stuff. You're going to see high flyers, you're going to see submission guys, you're going to see a bit of power stuff, because Hiromu does high-flying. He does some pretty crazy high-flying stuff, but he will also slam people around and make it look like he's about to kill someone. Then you got like Taguchi over here. That's Hiromu and Taguchi. Here's all Taguchi again. Taguchi, more of a comedy guy a lot of the time, but when he wants to, he is one of the best mat wrestlers in the promotion. He just doesn't show it very often. When he does, though, you will be surprised. Let's see. Who else we got? This is Yujiro Takahashi. He's a member of Bullet Club. Can't really say a whole lot about him because he's just kind of there, honestly. So let's go back to New Japan Pro Wrestling. Let's here we've got Kenny Omega, who you may have heard of. kind of one of the biggest names in pro wrestling outside of WWE right now. He and Okada, there's Okada, probably went after just winning a match. Those two have had some of the biggest, best matches in pro wrestling history, I would say. And if you like Dave Meltzer, he agrees. I don't really care. I'm not a fan of critics of any kind, really. And the guy that was with Omega there is Kota Ibushi. These two have a tag team together, and I'll let you discover that tag team on your own and come to your own conclusions. I'm not going to go into any of that stuff for now. Kota Ibushi, absolutely A-class talent as far as I'm concerned. You have Tama Tonga and his brother Tongaloa, and there's Bad Luck Fale. I do not see any pictures of Tongaloa. But Tama Tonga is the adopted son of Haku, aka Ming. Tongaloa is the biological son of Haku, aka Ming. Not that it matters that he's adopted, I just was trying to be accurate. Let me see if I can find them. Oh, for suggestion. How nice. There they are. Together. Without the mask. The face paint, I should say. You can definitely see the resemblance to Haku right there with him. I believe their other brother has also been in New Japan. I haven't seen him for a while, so I don't know what happened to him. But they're a tag team. They work there. Damn good tag team, too. Let's see, some other names that you might know. Michael Elgin, Ring of Honor, if you're familiar with indie wrestling at all. Michael Elgin works there. There's actually Haku coming out with both of them. Let's see, there's also Killer Elite Squad, who features another name that if you're familiar with older wrestling, you'll know who one of their fathers was. Killer Elite Squad. And Spooky, I think you'll find, let me see if I can find a really good picture of the two of them. That's not a very good picture. Yeah, right here. That's a pretty good one. Davey Boy Smith, British Bulldog, his son. And boy, does he ever look like him. They're members of Suzuki Gun, but again, they almost always work clean. They don't cheat, so very strange inconsistencies there, for me anyway. Let's see, some other guys that you'll probably notice. Here's an image of Toriano getting in the ring. That looks like that's from a video game. There he is. Toriano, the clown prince of New Japan, cheats constantly, but in a very funny way. He's always amusing. He will get wins over people, and everybody will just laugh. Because he's just such a sneaky little bastard. Well, he's not small. He's always hilarious. Some people don't like that style, but I always enjoy it. Watching what he does. If you did watch WWE, you may recognize Juice Robinson. I forget the name he went by in WWE or NXT, but apparently he did not accomplish much there, that he wasn't allowed to accomplish much. He came to New Japan, and as Juice Robinson has had nothing but success. He hasn't won any title. Well, I take that back. I think he's won the 6-man tag title. He hasn't won any singles titles, as far as I can remember, but People love him. And that's another thing that New Japan does that I love, that at least WWE doesn't really do, seemingly. They let people succeed. They don't try to keep anyone down. Like I said, they don't have like a caste system and try to force people into it. They let people succeed. If the audience likes somebody, they take it into account. They listen. And the booker for New Japan, Gato, who is one of the members of the tag team Jado and Gato, they've been around since the 80s, is a tag team. Had a lot of success all over Japan and even some in the States. Gato has earned the trust of all of us that watch New Japan. We trust that he will come through on things. And it's true. I mean, there was a recent video, What Culture Wrestling Did, that talked about that, and it's true. You know, he will do angles that will last for years. Sometimes he doesn't always know where something's going to go, and maybe, you know, maybe he doesn't always have a payoff planned right from the beginning. You can't always predict how things are going to turn out. But whenever it's possible for a payoff to happen, it will. You know, you can always trust Gato is going to bring things to a close at some point. It may not be when you expect it to happen. In fact, he really loves throwing curveballs at people. He doesn't like it to be predictable, which is another thing I love about New Japan. It is not predictable. Like last year's G1 Climax, I was absolutely positive Kenny Omega was going to win that, and the main event at Wrestle Kingdom was going to be Omega-Okada. I was wrong. Naito won, and Naito and Okada had the main event. I was absolutely positive that Naito was going to win that match. I was wrong. So, New Japan keeps it unpredictable. I said Chris Jericho has had a couple of matches, first with Omega, then he's had a match with Naito. I'm hoping he'll have a match with Okada at some point. That would be quite good, I think. But if you're at all familiar with Ring of Honor, you will see guys from Ring of Honor coming into New Japan to work. You will also see faces from England, like Will Ospreay. There's also Zack Sabre Jr. He's going to be in the G1 Climax this year. Not much of a fan of him, personally. There's also the villain, Marty Scurll. I don't care for him that much either. And yeah, just to kind of recap, if you've never watched New Japan before, it can be a little bit different to get into. It's going to take a while to get used to the different style. But all in all, it's very good pro wrestling. If what you like is pro wrestling, not sports entertainment, but pro wrestling, you want to see some great ring action, you want to see guys that know how to tell a story in the ring, tell us a good story, you want to see guys that are willing to take themselves to their limits in order to entertain you and tell that story to you, then New Japan is what you need to watch. You know, don't watch it because of the hype that's starting up about it. Watch it because it's worth it. It really is that good. You know, and unfortunately, it is, for some people, they don't like that it's a much harder hitting style. Some people, that's one of the reasons they love it. It is a harder hitting style. They still do their best to work clean, but they make it look like combat as much as they can. Even including all of the usual conceits of pro wrestling, things that are just inherently kind of silly about pro wrestling. Because let's face it, there are many things about pro wrestling that would never happen in any kind of actual fight or combat sport, like the Irish Whip, for example. But yeah, if you like the ring action, if that's your thing, or you would just prefer some actual pro wrestling with a minimum on the soap opera drama, check out New Japan. All of the big shows now have English commentary, so there is no language barrier. Even a lot of the smaller ones do. I think they are trying their best to work to a point where every single show that should have commentary is going to have English commentary. Because they really, really want to become an international company, and they are working as hard as they can on making that happen. So there are no excuses for not checking it out. So I think that covers everything. I mean, I could try to go over the whole roster, but I don't think it's necessary. I've covered most of the big players, I believe. Tried to tell you a bit about them. You know, you're going to see like Cody Rhodes works there sometimes as a member of Bullet Club. Let's see. I'm trying to think of any other important individuals. Everybody's important. Like I said, there's a lot more fluidity in who can do what in New Japan. But yeah, I mean, you can see Cody Rhodes working there. You know, lots of people. You know, I'd have to go over the entire roster, plus all the people that come in from other promotions, which would take forever, and I'm already almost 40 minutes into this, so I need to stop talking and let you get on with your lives. One last thing, though, is that I was talking about the harder hitting aspect, and this is specifically what made me think of it. Actually, let's bring a different picture up. Come on, where are you? Give me a picture of Shibata. There we go. Katsuyori Shibata is one of those stories that does kind of showcase why some people don't like Japanese wrestling and its harder hitting style. He was in a match with Okada, and usually he always works a very smash mouth, hard hitting style anyway. He worked. But there was one thing that he would do, and fortunately, I haven't been seeing many people do the headbutt since this happened to him. But he did a headbutt to Okada. And you could hear it, because New Japan, this skipped my mind, but there's another thing about New Japan that you'll have to get used to, is they mic the ring. So you hear the impact. You hear what's happening. There's another reason they don't call spots. If you're familiar with the terminology, I would imagine they've developed some sort of shorthand that they use with each other that doesn't involve verbal communication, but the ring is mic'd, so you hear all the impacts. You can look it up on video online, Shibata headbutt Okada, or some variation thereof. You hear the thud, and it is a sickening thud. And then you see blood trickling down Shibata's forehead, and then they still go another 5 or so minutes or more. I can't remember how much further the match went after that headbutt. He did it as a counter to the Rainmaker, an attempt at a Rainmaker. After the match, Shibata is walking back to the back from the ring and collapsed. He had to be rushed to the hospital. He had a cerebral hemorrhage, almost died, and he's probably never going to wrestle again. He might, but it's unlikely. Right now, he's working as the coach for New Japan's brand new dojo in the U.S. I think it's in California. So that is another thing you will have to get used to watching New Japan. They try to keep things safe, but it is still a harder, more high-impact style of pro wrestling. On the other hand, they're more able to safely do that stuff. The flip side of it is that they do not work the kind of schedule that WWE forces their wrestlers to work. You know, they've got their guys out on the road constantly. So if you're familiar with WWE, it is going, especially if you're only used to WWE, New Japan will look like they're actually stiffing each other. Which, again, if you're not familiar with the terminology, it means they're actually trying to hurt each other. They aren't. It's just harder hitting and higher impact. They're used to it. And they don't work the kind of schedule. They don't work as many dates. They don't work as many matches. And New Japan, I should have said this at the beginning. I keep forgetting stuff that's very important and because it's different. In New Japan, you are going to experience a god-awful amount of tag team matches. Every single show will begin with about half the show being tag matches. Between 4, 6, 8, and even 10 people. It takes time to get used to it, and sometimes, yes, you can just skip them. But there is a very key reason why New Japan does this. Firstly, there's key reasons, I should say. Firstly, it lets people get a payday, because everybody's on the card. And it protects everybody. Because you think about it. If you have two guys working a 20-minute match, it's two people. They're working the entire 20 minutes. If you have 4 guys working a 20-minute match, they're splitting up time with each other. So, you know, obviously it's not going to be truly averaged out, but call it 10 minutes each. You have 6 guys, splitting it up even further. Let's go to 21 minutes just to make it the math very easy. 7 minutes each. 8 guys, go back to 20 minutes, 5 minutes each. 5 guys on each side, 4 minutes each. So it protects the guys, it protects the wrestlers, it makes it so they don't have to work as hard every single show. Which means that if they've got any bruises that they've got to deal with, any stingers they've suffered, they get better recovery time while still having matches and being in the public eye. So I think I finally remembered everything I needed to talk about New Japan that's different to Western Pro Wrestling and especially WWE, because that's what most people are going to think of when you say pro wrestling. I know this has been kind of a long video, but New Japan has been around since the 70s. I believe, yeah, 70s. Antonio Inoki started New Japan Pro Wrestling. He also pretty much invented MMA by doing stuff like challenging guys like Muhammad Ali, which didn't work out for the best, but he still did those things and inspired other people to do similar things, which is completely irrelevant, but it is a promotion that's been around a long time. They've developed a very distinct style, which is going to take some time for you to get used to, but it's worth it. If you have ever in your life enjoyed watching pro wrestling, especially, I think, again, let me look up your name, because sometimes my brain is slippery as oil. Michael Sands. You said that you loved 90s Attitude Era pro wrestling. You're not going to get all the Vince Russo twists and soap opera shit, but if what you really were a fan of was the ring action from the 90s and the cruiserweights, the mid-card and lower card WCW stuff that was pro wrestling, you will absolutely love New Japan. And as my mom mentioned just a bit ago when I told her I was going to do this video, she doesn't even like pro wrestling, but she likes New Japan. Well, she never really cared for it before, but she really enjoys New Japan. It has a lot of appeal for a lot of people, but like anything else, it has a history. It has personalities you're going to have to get familiar with. It has a style all its own you're going to have to get familiar with. It's not something that you can just watch one show and act, and think that you understand it, or maybe you will after one show. And you can decide whether it's for you or if it's not for you. But you should give it a bit more than just one show. And whatever you do, do not base your reactions to it on highlight videos. Because if you watch a highlight video for a match, it's going to be like 15 minutes of high spots, completely leaving out the 30 minutes of everything else that was in that match, because main event matches in New Japan often go in excess of 40 minutes. The last Kenny Omega-Okada match went over an hour, because it was a 2 out of 3 falls, no time limit. The match they had, not the one right before that, but because that was a G1 Climax 30-minute time limit match, Kenny Omega won that one. The one before that they had was an hour time limit draw. So, again, perfect example of the great storytelling of Gato right there. Letting it simmer. Putting it back on the back burner, the feud between the two of them, and letting it cook a while longer before going to the next thing between them. So yeah, there are things you'll have to get used to. Do not base your notions about New Japan on highlight videos, because you're not getting the full story when you do that. Definitely give it a shot. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see y'all on the next one. Bye-bye.